You ever think about how a single sentence written 2,000 years ago could have the power to flip an entire empire's way of thinking on its head? Well, today we're diving into one of those sentences. It looks pretty simple on the surface, but its real meaning was a direct challenge to the politics, the religion, and the power structures of the ancient world. So, let's get right into it.
So here it is, from a nice, modern translation. And reading it, it sounds pretty straightforward, right? God takes enemies, turns them into friends, and then gives us the job of telling other people about that friendship. It feels warm, relational, almost cozy.
But what if that friendly, cozy language is actually hiding something explosive? What if this isn't just a nice thought about making friends, but the actual blueprint for a cosmic revolution? Well, that's the question we are digging into today.
To find the answer, we have to do a little detective work. We've got to go back to the source, to the original language it was written in, Koine Greek.
Okay, so the phrase translated changed us into his friends. The original Greek word there is katallasso. Now, this is not a word about hurt feelings or, making up after an argument. It's a formal, heavyweight, legal term. It means to officially end hostilities. It's what you do when you sign a peace treaty. It's a one-time, definitive, legal action, not some slow, emotional process.
And then there's the word for task. In Greek, it's diakonia. Now, that word could mean something simple, like serving food, but the way Christians began to use it elevated it to something so much bigger. It meant a sacred mission, an official commission handed down from the highest authority you can imagine. This isn't just a task, it's a divine appointment. So just look at the difference here. Making friends is great, it's accessible, it's relational, but the original meaning, reconciliation, carries this huge legal and diplomatic weight. See, the friendship is the amazing result, but the reconciliation is the powerful act that makes it all possible. It is literally the difference between throwing a dinner party and signing a treaty that ends a war.
So, just how radical was this idea of a divine peace treaty? Well, to really get it, we need to kind of transport ourselves back in time and step into the mindset of someone living in the 1st century.
Back in the Greco-Roman world, everybody knew the rules for making peace. There was a protocol, and you followed it. If you rebelled against Caesar, or if your city lost a war, it was simple. The weaker, guilty party, that's you had to start the whole process. You had to send your people, your envoys, to beg for mercy, and you absolutely had to pay. Tributes, sacrifices, whatever it took to appease the powerful person you offended. Everyone understood this. This was just how the world worked.
And then the Apostle Paul comes along and just shatters that entire script. He flips every single step completely on its head. In this new reality of the gospel, who starts the peace process? It's not the weaker party, us. It's the superior, offended party, God. And who pays the price? God does, through Christ. And then, the craziest part of all, who sends the ambassadors? God sends us, the former enemies, to go to the rest of the world and beg them to accept the peace that he has already secured.
You have to try and imagine how utterly scandalous this sounded. The idea that the supreme king of the universe would not only start the peace process with rebels, but would also pay the price himself. It was just unthinkable. This idea turned every political and religious assumption they had completely upside down. So, this revolutionary idea isn't just some random thought. It's actually the crucial puzzle piece that connects Paul's entire argument here.
Okay, so first, right before our verse, in verse 17, Paul establishes the incredible outcome. He says, if anyone is in Christ, they are a new creation. A totally new reality has kicked in.
So the obvious question is, how? How does someone become a new creation? And that is where our verse 18, comes in. It's the engine. It's the how-to. It says all this happened because God performed the divine act of reconciliation. That is the mechanism behind the miracle.
And that leads us to the logical conclusion a couple of verses later. Because God has reconciled us, because this peace treaty has been signed, we're given a new title and a new job description, ambassadors. The result of receiving peace is that we get commissioned to announce that peace to everyone else.
And that brings us to the final, really powerful takeaway here. This one verse totally transforms a person's identity. You're not just someone who received a gift, you become an active, commissioned ambassador of a kingdom. So it all really comes down to these 3 core truths. First, this whole thing was God's idea, His initiative. It's 100% from Him. Second, it was all accomplished through Christ's sacrifice. The peace treaty was basically signed on the cross. And third, that creates a mission imperative. The moment you receive this grace, you are drafted into diplomatic service.
Here's the bottom line. Put as simply as I can, to be a recipient of grace is to simultaneously become an agent of grace. You just can't separate the two. This salvation, it's not like a stagnant pond you just sit by. It's a flowing river, and it's meant to pour through you out into the world.
So let's just end with this final thought. If the war is already over, if God has already initiated the peace, paid the price, and signed the treaty, then what does that change about our message? It changes everything. Our job isn't to go convince a reluctant king to make peace. We are simply messengers, carrying the good news to the world that the king has already declared peace, and he's now inviting everyone to come home.